Today we're doing standard costing, and part of standard costing is variance analysis, analyzing the difference between what you expected to use in materials or other things, labor, and what you actually did use. So variance analysis is about comparing your expectations with what actually happened. So before you start your production, you have to prepare a budget. At that point, you don't know exactly how many units you're going to produce, how much the material is going to cost. You have an idea of what labor is going to cost, but it might change. You might use more labor than expected. So we prepare the budget in advance, and then we have to, as we found last week, we have to flex the budget to the number of units we actually produced, and when we flex the budget to the actual units, we can then compare apples with apples. So last week was about flexing the budget, and this week is about taking that flexed budget and then comparing it to what actually happened, analyzing the variances. Where were we above cost? Where were we below cost? Did we use more labor or less labor than we anticipated? So it's about variance analysis. We're going to be doing different types of variance analysis, overall cost analysis. We're going to analyze the price variance and the usage variance. So when it comes to materials, it's called price and usage. When it comes to labor, it's called rate and efficiency. Then we're also going to separate fixed and variable costs and analyze the fixed manufacturing overheads compared to the predetermined overhead rate that we use to allocate the fixed manufacturing overheads to production, and comparing the actual variable manufacturing overheads to the budgeted or predetermined overhead rate we use to allocate the variable manufacturing overheads to production. Alright, so we're going to do a comparison and calculate all the different variances. That's what we're planning to do tonight. Okay, so if we look at what, this is called standard costing. So if we look at what standard is a benchmark. It's a way of setting. So standard costing is involved with comparing your expectations, which you set in your standards at the beginning when you set your budget, to what actually happened. Okay, so it prescribes the performance and the minimum costs. Okay, so we're going to now look at how to apply the standard costing. So one of the advantages is that it forms the building blocks. We looked in last week and the week before at the master budget. We're now going to look at the production budget in terms of direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. So it enables us to do that. It's a method that we use to value inventory, and it's used to control costs mostly. Okay? So we use it as a performance measurement tool. Also, many production people in the production process get bonuses based on production. So we need to know, was it due to their input or was it actually due to something else? Okay, did they underpay their staff, the laborers, the workers that are busy doing the work? Alright, so it's time consuming, it can be pricey in terms of the qualification. Here's our production budget. Don't forget that the production budget is driven by the sales budget. How many do we want to sell? Based on how many we know, we think we will be able to sell, we determine how many we are going to produce. And then once we've got our production budget, we can break it down into our direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overheads. This is our planning. This is what we anticipate is going to happen. Tonight we're going to compare it to what actually happened. We can only compare it to what actually happened if we're comparing apples with apples. Therefore we have to first flex the budget. What does flex mean? You have to adjust it up or down to the actual number that you produced. So that's step one, is to flex it and to know how and what flexing means. Right. So we're using historical information. Obviously we go on the information, how many did we produce last year, what was the cost last year, how much are we expecting the cost to increase by, and it requires a lot of judgment and input from management. We know that. Okay. So it's done at the beginning of the period. We don't know exactly. It's not right to say we have no idea. We have an idea of what we did in the past, and we have an idea of what we expect to do in the future. So we estimate what the items will cost us based on how much labor we plan to use, how much material we plan to use, how much we intend to pay the labor, how much we intend to buy the material for. And exactly those 4 things are the variances that we then analyze. Okay. So we use this, once we've got the cost, the budgeted cost, to determine the selling price, and that's where it links to marketing. The allocation is done using cost drivers, so in some cases it may be machine hours, in other cases maybe number of units, in some cases maybe labor hours. So like we did very earlier on with the units, you have to look at what the cost driver is that is used to allocate that cost to production. Okay, so what we do is we compare, we flex the budget like I showed you last week, and then we compare the flexed budget to the actual cost. And that will give us an overall variance, and then we can break that into a price and a quantity variance. And this is what we're going to do tonight. This is the bit that is tricky, that's difficult, and that involves formulae, but I'm going to show you how to set it up. Okay, so the variance is favorable. It's very important to know when it's favorable, when it's unfavorable. Okay, you went to Sandton City and you bought some Jimmy Choo shoes. You expected to pay 2,000 Rand for a pair of shoes, but you paid 2,500. Was that a favorable price or an unfavorable price? Unfavorable. Your expectation was 2,000. You paid, your actual was more than your expectation. That was unfavorable. Nobody wants to go into Woolworths expecting to pay 18 Rand for bananas and pay 30 Rand. That's unfavorable. Okay, so it's favorable if you ended up paying less than you had expected to pay, and it's unfavorable if you ended up paying more. Okay, so remember the difference between favorable and unfavorable. You've got to be able to say whether it's a favorable variance or an unfavorable variance. Okay, so we analyze them and we determine the price variance and the quantity variance. Okay, so it looks at what we expected to use and what we actually did use. Whether it's labor, whether it's materials, whether it's the overheads, what did we expect and what did we actually use? But unless we have flexed it to compare apples with apples, then any information we think we're getting out is not knowledge or useful in any way at all. Okay, so we have to flex it first. So looking at each component, we get a cost variance for each one. So we get a total variance for the whole product, for the period. Then we get a cost variance for direct materials, direct labor, manufacturing overheads. Then we can break that down further into direct materials usage variance, if we've used more materials than we had anticipated. Direct materials price variance, if the materials cost us more or less than we anticipated. The labor efficiency variance is, did we use more hours of labor than we planned? And of course the labor rate variance is, did we pay the labor more than we had anticipated? And then this total manufacturing overheads variance can be broken into fixed and variable. And we'll analyze it on that basis. So there's your total manufacturing cost variance. That's the first variance you calculate. Then you calculate your direct materials cost variance. Then you calculate your direct labor cost variance. Then you calculate your manufacturing overhead cost variance. Can you see how the marks, you can see the marks are just adding up, hey? All right. So these questions are normally also for quite a few marks. All right. Then you break your direct materials cost variance down to analyze how much of this variance was due to the fact that they used more materials than we anticipated, or how much was used to the fact that the price was more than we anticipated, if it was an unfavorable variance. Sometimes you have an unfavorable variance here and a favorable variance here. This variance plus this variance will always equal this variance here. So that's a way that you can check that you're correct. You add that one and that one, and they should equal the one above it. Okay. Then your labor cost variance you break down into the efficiency labor variance and the labor rate variance. Okay. We don't go this far, we go that far when it comes to this. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different variances that we have to be able able to calculate. So we've got a budget at 12,000 units. We're going to flex the budget to 13,200 units. We can do it in one of two ways. We found that out last week. In this example, we've been told the budget is 12,000 as well as the cost driver and the cost per unit, or the cost per cost driver. Okay? So here, in the examples we're going to do later, the cost driver isn't always per unit, it could be something else, but in this case the cost drivers are per unit for all the variable costs. Okay, variable, 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 all per unit. So an easy one to start with. And we can just simply take that 10 Rand times 13,200. So we're going to get 132,000 for our direct labor cost at 13,200. Okay? That's going to be our flexed budgeted cost. So step one is to flex the budget. Right. So you've got this example. It's almost identical to the one you did last week, except that we're doing it to 13,200 units, and these are all per month, and this is only 1 month. Okay? So it's the monthly budget for July, August, and September, but we are looking only at September. So this is 1 month. And what I want you to do, these are the actual figures here. You're going to flex it to 13,200 here, and you're going to take the one minus the other. Remember, if the actual is more, you are going to put an unfavorable, and if the actual is less, you're going to put a favorable. Once you've added up all the, whichever one is the most, the favorables, and subtracted the unfavorables, you're going to get a total variance down here. It said 3,000 plus 3,000 fixed plus 1 Rand per unit, okay, but the fix was on the next line, so that's I think what confused you. The 3,000 was the fixed amount, and the 1 Rand, if it says per unit, that's the variable amount. So it was 1 Rand times 13,200 is 13,200 Rand, plus the 3,000 fixed is 16,200, okay. Then the others were all fixed. They stay what was in the budget, because fixed does not vary depending on the number of units. So it doesn't matter whether units go up or down, fixed is fixed, it stays as budgeted. Okay? This one here confused you, which was great, because here the actual cost was 1,400, although it's a fixed cost, it costs more. The factory cleaners went on strike and we had to pay them more. Okay? So we're comparing 1,400 was what we actually paid them, whereas we should have budgeted, we anticipated paying them 1,000. Therefore, we paid them 400 Rand more. It's 400 unfavorable. Okay, you see the spelling mistake? Yeah. Sorry. Alright, so we add them up now, alright? We get a flexed total of 362,200 compared to an actual. Now this is what we anticipated or expected, this is what actually happened. These were our expectations, this was reality, okay? So we can see overall we had a favorable variance. Can you all see that overall it was favorable? Because the actual is less than the budgeted, okay? So it was good. We paid less for it than we planned, than we anticipated, okay? And if we take that minus that, we see we get an overall favorable variance of 20,280. Now, if we do the individual variances and add them up, we should get to 20,280. And if you do that, then you know that you're on the right track. If you've made the mistake with the 1,400, if you put 1,400 there, you're going to get the wrong amount there, and it's still going to add up. So you won't necessarily see that you've made a mistake. So remember, fixed is fixed is fixed. Okay? Right. So we take 12,000 plus 10,000 is 22,000 minus 1,320 minus 400 gives us 20,280. The total manufacturing cost variance, that's this one down here. This is the total manufacturing cost variance. It's the sum of all the different variances, okay? And it's the difference between the total actual and the total budgeted or planned or anticipated, right? It's also called the overall budget variance. Now, we can break that total cost variance down into direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overheads. We know in this example here, I hope I did it right, that we've got a variable overhead variance and a fixed overhead variance. Remember, we've got a 400 Rand fixed overhead variance, and we've got a 1,320 Rand variable overhead variance, because this overhead variance here, 1,320, happened from the variable side, not so? There was no change to the fixed 3,000. Okay, so they're both unfavorable. So we would be able to split the manufacturing overhead variance into the fixed component, which is 400 unfavorable, and the variable component, which is 1,320 unfavorable. This is, I find, the easiest way to break the variance analysis down to the next level. Okay? We calculate three amounts. Okay? So we do the standard quantity times the standard price. That's the first calculation we do. Then we do the actual quantity times the actual price. In some of the examples, in some of the questions, they give you the rand amount of the actual quantity times the actual price. So you don't have to even do that calculation, you've been given the number, okay? Then you have to compare the actual, multiply the actual quantity by the standard price. If you look here now, what is the difference between this formula and this formula? Can you see that standard price is the same? So we're comparing standard quantity and actual quantity. So if we're looking at quantity, standard quantity, actual quantity. So this is going to give us a quantity variance between the standard and the actual, not so. So this is our direct materials usage variance or quantity variance. Okay, if you look at the difference between this formula and this formula, what is difference? The quantity remains the same. That's a standard price, that's an actual price. So once we compare that to that, we're going to see the difference in price. Can you see that? Okay, so the difference between what we get here and the difference between what we're going to get here is based on the difference in the standard price and the actual price. Okay, so the direct materials usage variance is the standard quantity times standard price minus actual quantity times standard price. Okay, don't worry about these formulae because you're going to make a picture and then you're going to remember it. Okay, the direct materials price variance is the difference between actual quantity times standard price minus actual quantity times actual price. This is going to give us the difference that's due to price. This is going to give us the difference that's due to quantity or usage. Okay, and then if we compare standard quantity times standard price, this is the flexed budgeted amount. Okay, so right there, flexed, because that's the one thing people forget to do. They forget to flex it. So when I say standard quantity, I mean flexed standard quantity. Not the standard quantity for producing 9,000 units if we produce 12,000 units. I mean the standard quantity for producing 12,000 units. Okay, so if we compare this to this, we're going to get the overall variance. Because this is the standard minus the actual, is going to give us the direct materials cost variance. Okay, let's do an example. So here, I've given you the flex budgeted cost, right? So I've calculated the flex budgeted cost for you already. This is standard quantity times standard price. I've given it to you, right? Here's your actual cost. This is actual quantity times actual price, okay? This is the standard price. This is the standard quantity, 1.5 meters per unit. And that is the standard cost per unit. Why? Because 8 times 1.5 is 12. Okay. So what we want to do now is look at what actually happened. Okay. We budgeted to manufacture 9,000 units, but we actually manufactured 10,000 units. And we used 16,000 meters of direct materials. So this is the actual quantity of direct materials. Is 16,000 meters. Actual quantity. Okay. So underline and highlight this or something and put next to it AQ. That's your actual quantity. That's your standard price, SP. This is your actual quantity, 16,000 meters. What is your standard quantity going to be? What's your standard quantity per unit? 1.5 meters. And you produce 10,000 meters. Therefore, your standard quantity for the 10,000 units must be 15,000 meters. So underneath here, right, standard quantity is 10,000 times 1.5. We flex it to 10,000 multiplied by the quantity per unit. 10,000 units times 1.5 meters a unit gives us our standard quantity. Okay? So we're using the standard price of 8 Rand. We're not really going to use this figure here at all. Okay, so we've got actual quantity, we've got standard quantity, we've got standard price. If you go back here, there are only 4 things you need. Standard quantity, standard price, actual quantity, and actual price. Okay, so we've got standard quantity, standard price, and actual quantity. The only thing we haven't got is actual price. We've got the flex budgeted cost of 120,000, okay? So, and we've got the actual cost of 108,000. So we used 16,000 meters, okay? So if we take 108,000, okay, divided by 16,000 meters, we're going to get a price per meter. Can you see that? That's going to be your actual price. It cost us 108,000 Rand. And we used 16,000 meters. So based on that, we can work out the actual price per meter. It must be 108,000 Rand divided by 16,000 meters. So now we've got everything we need to do all the calculations. So if you now take the figures you've got here, standard quantity, okay, so 10,000 times 1.5 times 8. Should give you 120,000. Does it do that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so you can see where we got the 120,000 from. Everybody see where we got underneath that, right? 10,000 units times 1.5 meters a unit times 8 Rand. Standard flexed units is 10,000 units. Standard quantity 1.5 meters, standard price 8 Rand. Okay? So this must be standard quantity flexed 10,000 units times 1.5 meters a unit times standard price 8 Rand gives you 120,000. You've got to flex it. Okay? So it's the same as the activity we just did now. How many units did we produce?
10,000.
So write 10,000 down. What's the standard quantity per unit? So right, multiply by 1.5. That's going to give you your standard quantity, your total standard quantity you used. Okay? Multiply by your standard price. What's your standard price? Yes. So standard quantity times standard price is 10,000 units times 1.5 times 8. 10,000 units, we flexed it. 10,000 units. It's not a standard, it's the flexed. It's the number of units we actually produced. We're flexing it. We're flexing to 10,000 units. So when you do standard quantity, you flex it first to the number of units you actually produced. So you're comparing apples with apples. You produce 10,000 units. So your standard quantity must be 10,000 units times your standard quantity per unit of 1.5 meters a unit must be 15,000 meters. Okay, can everyone see that the standard quantity for this production was 15,000 meters? Because we flexed it. Now, to get standard quantity times standard price, the standard price was 8 Rand. 15,000 times 8 should give you, I hope, 120,000. Good. Right. Actual quantity times actual price, you've been given. Actual cost, 108,000. Okay? So that is actual quantity times actual price is 108,000. Next, we have to do actual quantity times standard price. But don't worry about how we calculated that. We didn't. We were given it. Okay? Actual quantity. Now we're not looking at standard quantity. We're looking at actual quantity. But we're going to multiply by the standard price. What was the standard price? Do you remember? 8 Rand, exactly. Times the actual quantity. The actual quantity was 16,000 meters. It's here. So this figure here is 16,000 times 8, which I hope is 128,000. Have you all written these figures down? The 120,000, the 128,000, and the 108,000. And have you written down how you calculated it? We do standard quantity. The direct materials cost variance is standard quantity times standard price. That was the 120,000 minus actual quantity times actual price was the 108,000. We get 12,000 is the difference between those two, and it is favorable because the actual is less than the standard. You're just taking this figure here minus this figure here, and you're getting 12,000 favorable. Okay, right, now we must break it down into the usage and the price, okay? We're comparing standard quantity times standard price to actual quantity times standard price. Standard quantity times standard price we know is 120,000, okay? Actual quantity times standard price we calculated as 108,000, remember? 128,000. So 120,000 minus 128,000, actual is more than standard, it must be 8,000 unfavorable. 8,000 unfavorable. Okay? Now we must calculate the direct materials price variance. So we're going to compare actual quantity times standard price with actual quantity times actual price. So we're going to compare the 128,000 with the 108,000. We can see it's a 20,000 variance. Can you see that? No. Is it favorable or unfavorable? Favorable because we paid less than we planned to pay. Right, so now look what happens, okay? This direct materials cost variance is comparing 120 and 108. Therefore, it's 12,000 favorable, okay? So this one compares that and that, okay? Can you see that it's 12,000 favorable? That's what we said. We calculated it, okay? Then this one, the usage, compares that and that. So 120 minus 128 is 8,000 unfavorable. Can you see that? Okay. This one compares that and that. 128 minus 108 is 20,000 favorable. Here we've got 20,000 favorable, and here we've got 8,000 unfavorable. 20,000 minus 8,000 is 12,000 favorable. So this plus this gives you that. So what you need to do is draw a picture and put these in. The first time you get given your question paper, on the top left you do standard quantity times standard price. On this side you do actual quantity times actual price. You say, what am I comparing on this side? Price. So what must change here? Price. Okay? Therefore, this one must be, the price must change. So it must be standard price, but the quantity must stay the same. Otherwise, I'm not comparing it correctly. So this is actual quantity times standard price. Or you say, what am I doing here? I'm comparing the material usage. Therefore, the quantity must change. So I must go actual quantity, the price must stay the same because otherwise it isn't comparative. And then you just take this overall variance is that minus that. This variance is that minus that. And this variance is that minus that. Okay, so here are the three amounts you calculated, 120,000, 128,000, and 108,000. You didn't calculate that, it was given to you. Okay. And then you calculated the difference between that and that is 12,000 favorable. and then you calculated the difference between that and that is 8,000 unfavorable, and then the difference between that and that is 20,000 favorable. Then you've done all your variances, and you've checked 20,000 minus 8,000 is 12,000. I'm good to go. Yes?
The actual price and the actual quantity is always given.
No. We're going to sometimes have to work it out. Okay, but there's always enough given to be able to do the calculation. Because even here, you haven't at any point been given the actual price. Okay, but you can calculate the actual price. So if one of the questions was, what was the actual price per meter that they paid, which is some of the questions that you've got in your ULINK quiz is structured like that, okay? You can say, well, my actual cost was 108,000 and the actual meters was 16,000 meters. Therefore, the actual price must be 108,000 divided by 16,000. That's going to give you your actual price. Okay, so from the information you're given, you're able to calculate everything. Okay. So we've done this. We've done the direct materials usage and price variance, not so? So now we're going to do the direct labor variances, the efficiency and the rate variance. And if you call each one usage and cost or usage and price, it's fine. Okay? It doesn't really matter. Okay. So now we're doing the labor variance. We're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to calculate standard quantity times standard price, actual quantity times standard price, and actual quantity times actual price. And from there, we're going to be able to calculate everything else. Okay. So here are the figures we've been given. You can see these two are quite similar, but we're going to do other examples that are different. Okay. We've once again been given the actual cost for the 11,000 units. They actually manufactured 11,000 units. They used 7,000 hours of direct labor to manufacture 11,000. So this is the actual hours that they've used as well. Like the actual materials, that's the actual hours. Okay? So now we want to calculate the overall direct labor cost variance. And then we want to calculate the efficiency and then the rate. So we're going to go back to our picture. You've got this in front of you, this slide. So we can go here and we can say, right, what is standard quantity times standard price? Okay? Here standard quantity is 45 minutes. Remember, we must flex it to the actual units. So it must be 11,000 units times 45 minutes is 0.75. Don't get confused, okay? 45 minutes is 0.75 of an hour. Okay, so we want to convert it to hours. So 45 minutes is 0.75 of an hour. Are you with me?
Yeah.
3/4 of an hour is 45 minutes. Okay. So it's 11,000 units times the standard quantity times 0.75 times the standard price of 16 Rand should give you 132,000. We're going to go through those. We're going to do it like this. Okay. So if you take your direct labor cost variance, it's the difference between that and that. It must be 10,000 favorable. Okay? Your direct labor efficiency variance is the difference between the 132,000 and the 112, which is 20,000, and it must be favorable because the budget is less than the actual. What you anticipated and what actually happened, the difference is 20,000. Okay? And then here, your difference between your actual quantity times standard price and actual quantity times actual price, the price difference must be 112 minus 122. The actual is higher, 10,000 unfavorable. Check. 40 favorable minus 10 unfavorable gives you 10 favorable. You are correct. There it is, 122.
Also, we assume that.
So up until now, you haven't had to calculate actual quantity times actual price. Mostly, it's an entry in your accounting records. This is what it cost you. It cost you 122,000. So you go to the bookkeeper, you say, how much did that material cost us? Hold on, I'll look it up. 122,000 Rand. Fine. Okay. Right. So Okay, that's just putting it in a different way. There's your 20,000 favorable, your 10,000 unfavorable, and 20,000 favorable minus 10,000 unfavorable gives you 10,000 favorable. Okay, there's the 122,000, there's the 122, and that's the 112. Everyone understand where I got the 112,000 rand from? Do you know where the 112,000 rand came from? Yes. Okay, everyone's okay with everything? Right, then it's time to move on. Next example. Now this one is different, okay? These are the actual units produced. These are the actual, this is the actual material used. This is the standard production. This is the standard price. This is the actual price. So you haven't been given the actual rand value here. Actual quantity times actual price, you're going to have to calculate, okay? There's the actual price, 17 Rand 50. There's the actual amount used. Actual quantity is 3,822 meters. So actual quantity times actual price is 3,822 meters times 1750. Now don't forget, the standard production of 1,000 units is not the flexed amount. Right? The actual units produced is 980 units. So we have to flex it. So your standard quantity is going to be what? 980 times your standard 4 meters a unit. Okay? That's your standard quantity. So your standard quantity times standard price is going to be 980 times 4 times 18. So here we are. We have to calculate 3 amounts. From the figures you've been given, you've got to calculate standard quantity times standard price. You've got to calculate actual quantity times actual price. And you've got to calculate actual quantity times standard price. There's your actual amount used, actual quantity, and there's your standard price. So you can calculate all 3 of those amounts. Okay? You can calculate that, you can calculate that, and you can calculate some things we don't know, and we're going to use the things we know to find out the things we don't know. That's the only reason we have formulae, to use the things we know to find out the things we don't know. So here we've got already an unfavorable price variance. Okay? So we've got to work with what we know. We've got the standard price per meter and the actual material used for production. So we've got standard price and actual quantity. Can you see that? Yes. So we can go to that middle section, standard price and actual quantity times standard price. We can do that. 52,000 times 12 is going to give us actual quantity times standard price is going to give us 624,000. Can you see that? Yeah. Now, if we've got an unfavorable, look, it's said to us, unfavorable raw materials price variance. We know the price variance is over here. Not so? Therefore, this must be 10,400 Rand higher than this because it's unfavorable. It actually cost us more than we planned. 4,000 plus 10,400 gives you 634,400. So what were you asked to do? Calculate the actual purchase price. Okay? So now, you've not quite finished, have you? You've got your actual quantity times the actual price is 634,000. Do you agree? And you know your actual quantity is 52,000. So you take your 634,400, divide by 52,000, and you will get your actual price. Why? Because this 634,000 is actual quantity times actual price. And you know that your actual quantity is 52,000. Therefore, your actual price must be 634,400 divided by 52,000. That makes sense? By 52,000, by your actual quantity. Okay, so now you know that your actual quantity times actual price must equal 634,400. You agree? Yeah. So you say 634,000 is equal to actual quantity times actual price. But you want to know the actual price, so you take the actual quantity from that side to that side. So actual price is 634,400 divided by 52,000. 634,200 divided by 52,000. Okay? This is as difficult as it gets, guys. It's not that difficult. You were given, look at what you were given. You were given the unfavorable variance, okay? You were given the actual quantity and the standard price. So you could calculate the actual quantity times the standard price by taking 52,000 times 12. You got a number. 624,000, okay? Then you knew you had an unfavorable price variance of 10,400. You know that the actual must be more. Therefore, the total actual must be 624,000 plus 10,400 is 634,400. That is the actual quantity times actual price. If actual quantity times actual price is 634,400, then actual price must be 634,400 divided by actual quantity of 52,000 is 12 Rand 20. Did you get that, Terence?
Yes.
Think about it, guys. Does it make sense? Okay, this section is going to be really helpful to do the Euling quiz for, okay? The picture, and put those three formulae down, and look at what you've actually got, and then what you can work out from what you've actually got. Right, so what do we have to do? We have to calculate the standard labor hours. So we've got the actual hours worked, and we've got the standard rate, okay? So we've got actual quantity times standard price, okay? And we've got a favorable labor efficiency variance. So that's going to be on the efficiency side, okay? So we've got actual quantity times standard price, 18,000 times 20. We've got a favorable efficiency variance of 8,000, okay? That means the actual was less. If it's favorable, the actual was less. So we add the 8,000 here. Therefore, standard quantity times standard price must be 368,000. If 368,000 is standard quantity times standard price, and standard price is 20 Rand, then standard quantity must be 368,000 divided by 20. Now we're looking here. We're taking the overhead cost and dividing it into variable and fixed. We're looking at these ones here. Okay. So the fixed costs were unchanged and their budgeted costs and actual production period are as follows. Okay. So this is fixed at 18 Rand a meter. This is fixed 4,000 fixed plus 1 Rand 40. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to flex the budget. Okay. So that is the budget of 10,000. Enterprise produced 12,200. So the first thing we have to do is flex it to 12,200. This is what it was for 10,000 units, and we need to flex it to 12,200 meters. Okay, we're using the same space, so that's going to stay the same. Right. So if we look at we're looking at the variable manufacturing overhead. Okay. So the electricity, the variable component was 1 Rand. And the depreciation, the variable component was 1 Rand 40. Okay, so if we have a look here, the electricity is 12,200 units times 1 Rand gives you 12,200. The depreciation is 12,200 units times 1 Rand 40 gives you 17,080. You add them together, you get 29,280. Right? But now, you've been given the actual costs that include a fixed component. You agree? This is a mix, they're both mixed. So from the 15,500, you need to subtract the 3,000 to get the actual variable cost. So we're separating the fixed and the variable. So the actual variable cost here must be 12,500. You agree? And the actual variable cost here must be 16,000. So the two added the variable costs together is 12,500 plus 16,000 is 28,500. Okay? So this is your actual cost. Your actual variable manufacturing overheads is 28,500. Your standard variable manufacturing overheads, your budgeted variable manufacturing overheads is 29,280. Where did I get it from? I flexed it to 12,200 units at 1 rand a unit. 12,200 units at 1 rand 40 a unit. I got those two amounts, I added that together. This is my flexed standard budget, okay? My fixed budget. And this is the actual. Can you see the difference is going to be 29,280 minus 28,500 is 780 favorable because the actual is less than the budgeted. Okay? So the fixed and the variable are not very difficult to do. The important thing is to separate the variable manufacturing overheads and the fixed manufacturing overheads. So some of you are getting confused when you've got a mixed overhead. That's a combination of fixed and variable. So that's how you would get it there. Okay? So if you look at the variances here, this is 1,080 variance and this is 300 variance. So 1,080 minus 300 also gives you 780. Just two different ways of calculation. That's it, okay? Thank you. Good luck for tomorrow night.